Welcome to the Through the Veil podcast. I'm Elle.
I'm Camille.
Welcome and happy holidays, guys, despite the fact that it's December and I have bats behind me.
Yeah, if you're just listening, Elle in the room she's at has some like fall decor. We could just
I have
pretend
a
we
fall
recorded
garland.
this a couple months ago.
We could just pretend.
Yeah,
I'm super behind schedule and I'm always busy, so I have not taken down my Halloween decorations in my room, but that's fine. It
that's
can
fine.
be, I'm just a bit batty.
There you go. It fits your brand. Okay, you guys, what we're talking about today is very exciting. But before we get started, we wanted to tell you guys because of the holidays, we're not going to be releasing weekly episodes for a couple of weeks. Possibly we'll take a break for a week or two. So,
We might post some shorts for y'all, though.
mm,
We have a grand plan. We're going to start putting some shorts up on our Instagram, so catch that. Answering questions and sharing experiences about some of the sessions we do with people and questions that people ask us all the time. So if you have questions that you would like to have answered about gifts or about spirit communication or our experiences, please ask them. Post them on our Facebook page or even here in the comments. And we would love to shoot some little shorts for you guys.
yeah. So today's topic is how do we support spiritually sensitive children? Elle and I both have, between the two of us, we have 9 children.
It's a lot.
Yeah, we have a lot of kids. And, sometimes these conversations begin in families, they're initiated by kids having experiences. So it's good to be prepared on how to support these children and not shut them down or make them feel like their experiences aren't real. So we're going to discuss that today.
I think it's a common topic people have, especially if children don't know how to talk about it, because sometimes there are experiences that don't have readily available words. At least that was my experience. I didn't ever know how to bring it up to my parents when I was a kid. And that was part of the reason maybe I was so isolated in it. I don't know that they would have known what to do with it, really.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the first step to approach that is to make them not feel isolated in what they're going through, to like normalize and give them a place where they can speak about these things that can be A, frightening, and B, a little strange, especially if your children are older.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know in my family, we've normalized spiritual experiences with, spirits. But because after our son passed away, I would say things like, well, I felt him close by. And so I'd say, I feel like Wesley, for example, at his funeral, I said, I could feel Wesley at the funeral a couple times. And my husband said, yeah, I felt like when you sang at his funeral, he was standing behind you. And then my kids, a couple of them, or one of them said, when there was a bunch of little kids that sang at his funeral, they felt like he was up there singing with them. And there was a moment when you could tell there was like a bunch of kids getting emotional as they were singing up there. And these are like 8-year-olds. Like they don't normally get teary when they're singing, in public, but there was a few of them that started wiping their eyes around the same time. And that's when one of my kids said, that's when I felt Wesley, was when the kids started crying. So just
That's
normal.
great context. Yeah. And especially, I mean, not everyone has a loved one that they've lost so close to their family, but everybody has people, right? Whether that's a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or even a friend or something like that. I think talking about that in a way that's not scary is really beneficial. I mean, when I was a kid, I did have many experiences seeing and hearing maybe more negative spirits, but probably and I I can't really pinpoint at this point which ones were and which ones were maybe my loved ones because I was just scared of all of it because I didn't know what any of it was. But how many of those opportunities could I have possibly missed that maybe it was a loved one of mine, like a family member that was related to me that I didn't realize and understand at the moment because I was just scared of all of it. And oftentimes, family members will appear to, particularly children, so many stories about grandparents coming at night or in dreams to children or even great grandparents, people that they didn't know, and coming to them in dreams or sitting next to them in bed. And if you don't give space to talk about that, they're just going to be scared of it. When you can open an opportunity to have a conversation and make this kind of a more normalized subject. Oh, yeah, these things happen. Oh, it happened to you? What happened? How interesting. Isn't that exciting? And then it doesn't become scary anymore. once you talk about something and name the fear, it loses its power to be scary over you, even with the negative things. Once you begin to open that conversation, it becomes something that's manageable and handleable instead of something that is unknown and completely terrifying.
Yeah, because I've had kids that have had positive experiences and some that have had scary experiences, and just creating a environment where they feel comfortable expressing any of it. Like
Right.
I'm not just here to for them to tell me about the good stuff. Like I'm here for any of it. Kind of like what parents are trained, or we're being trained as parents to be emotionally available to our kids. So you have a happy feeling, you have a bad feeling, you're scared, mad, whatever. Like we're here for all of your big feelings. It's kind of the similar format, is we're here for whatever is happening. Like we're available to talk about any of it.
I think it's also important to not minimize the really scary things that may sometimes occur. There's plenty of positive things. We'll talk about those in just a minute, but um, like listen to your children. I mean, my kids, every night there's the battle. I'm scared. Don't turn off the hall light. Like, I don't want to go to bed. And I think sometimes it really is like, I don't want to go to bed. Like they're making an excuse, right? But I don't know. I'm a huge proponent of asking them why and getting to the bottom of the problem. When I was a kid, um, I was scared because I knew that there were things in my room with me, right? I would see shadows, I would see figures, I would hear things. I would just have this inexplicable knowledge like there's somebody with me in
Mm-hmm.
this room right now. And it would terrify me. And my parents were just like, go to bed, go to bed. And I mean, sometimes I'm like that with my kids too, but I kind of have to coach my husband down sometimes when he gets really frustrated with I'm not sleeping. I'm like,
Just go to
maybe.
bed.
Exactly. I'm like, parents, that sacred time when bedtime hour is here. It's worth asking and really probing in with your kids. Why? Like what is making them afraid? Is it just a general there's monsters in the closet, or are they really feeling into something? When my son was my oldest, he was pretty young. He was like 3 or 4 probably. We lived in this old house. This was in Pennsylvania. This house was built in 1735, I think. It was like basically as old as you can get in America.
Yeah.
And there were spirits in this house. For a couple nights in a row, he wasn't sleeping well, and finally, he started commenting about a man that was in his room with him. And it was just slow comments at first, just offhand things. He was like 3 or 4, so sometimes they just randomly spout knowledge. Oh yeah, that man last night. And you're like, what man? If you're busy and you don't catch it and you don't probe into that conversation, you could miss it. But at the moment I caught it and I was like, what man? What man are you talking about? And he was like, oh, the man that was in my room last night. I've seen him for a couple of nights now. He's really scary. And I was like, you want to tell me about this man that's in your room? And he was like, yeah, sometimes I wake up at night and he's standing over me and he's looking at me and he has a mean face. And I was like, oh, well, have you told me about this before? He's like, yeah, I wake up and I cry. And I was like, explanation achieved. That's why he's
Mm-hmm.
been not sleeping at night. So the next night he woke up crying and I went in there and he's like, I saw the man again. And I was like, is he still here? And he said, no, but this time he wanted me to do scary things. It was like, all right, well, let's take care of this. And so there are things that you can do at that moment, like, casting them out, asking them to leave, using white light, setting barriers, and praying with your children that can become really important. And that has been something that we have done since then. Um, since he was, 3 or 4, whenever he has instances like that, we talk about it. And always, always we involve prayer. We ask for angels to come, be guardians over the room that he's in. Um, we talk about spirits and we talk about, good and bad ones and how we can protect ourselves. So I think it's really important to be that protector and have your children know that there are ways to handle those scary situations. Open the door to talk about those conversations. And you as a parent, the knowledge that you can step in and handle that when it occurs. You don't have to have your house be a place where just anything can pop in and be scary, be instigating fear or alarm in your children.
I have a child who trying to be careful not to out which kid is having which experience because some of them might not be comfortable with that. I have a child who's has been having some scary experiences, and so we've talked to this child about not feeding into the fear.
Yeah,
Um, and I actually referred this child to listen to Elle's podcast, the episode 1, right after our trailer. I interviewed Elle about her experiences as a kid. I highly recommend going back to that episode if this is something that is you're experiencing. Um, Also, Elisa's episode, and Rachel,
right.
right? These other episodes discuss this, but it's a very
Happens so
real
often.
experience. Yeah, and just because it doesn't, so for me, when I was a kid, I had a few scary experiences, but it wasn't as repetitive as some other people. So maybe I'm not the perfect parent for a child who's having these experiences. Maybe I need to refer them to someone else's experiences. That's just why Elle's and other episodes are so valuable. These experiences are real, even if they haven't happened to you. I think it's a mixed bag because I've noticed with this child having the negative experiences has also had several positive experiences,
Right.
seeing loved ones that have passed on, not just limited to Wesley, my son, who passed away 6 years ago, but grandpa, grandma, others. We've
Didn't
had,
they even see your cat?
yes, yes, they did. Our sweet cat, you guys, we had the world's best cat. I have a daughter who's autistic, and this cat was like her therapy animal. And the coyotes got him in California, and it was really sad. But yeah, this cat shows up sometimes, and I just saw the cat on the counter, like not the cat we currently have, but like the spirit of our other cat just shows up. It's pretty amazing.
The thing about that, I think that is amazing, um, and this I have it like emphasized over the course of my own life, is when you focus on those positive experiences and you do the things necessary to keep those,
Raising
to
your
lift that
vibration.
vibration. Yeah, lift that vibration. Have them, um, you get a relationship with God.
Mm,
Listen to uplifting music. Get rid of bad influences in their life. Anything that can up that vibration, the happy vibes, good positivity. It makes it harder for those scarier experiences to occur. And it ushers in more and more of those positive experiences. So that it can kind of turn the tide. Otherwise, it can feel kind of like a curse, especially as a young person, when they're going through a lot anyway. I mean, you're shifting a ton, especially as you move into those teenage years. You're growing, you're creating your identity. You have hormones,
mhm,
dealing with social situations and friend groups. You don't want to have a whole nother layer of things to deal with. It gives you anxiety. It can really influence your life in a negative way. So emphasizing that positivity and giving them experiences that bring in light and talking about even your own experiences with your loved ones through the veil, I think kind of can influence them to have more experiences with their loved ones instead of with negative forces.
yeah. Also, more of a note, I think I don't know if I would necessarily put this burden on my children, but just to teach them, and maybe there's a age appropriate way to teach it, but another way to lift or raise that vibration and stay away from like the negative is to be aware of anger in your life and resentment because
Right.
that can really lower it. And when I teach grief, like healing from grief, it's one of the known grief stages to be angry. I'm not saying we're not going to have a human experience. We just don't want to stay stuck and have it get worse and worse because anger holds us in a lower place, right? And so
Yeah.
then we're more susceptible to the negative. And so just to check your heart and, ask God for help when you're feeling angry. If you're having a hard time forgiving someone, I'm not saying we need to let unhealthy people into our lives, but having like harboring resentment in our hearts only hurts us, right? To free ourselves from those negative kind of chains, negative emotions, just to be asking God for help and because it can really drag you down. I've seen people who, in sessions where they'll say things like, I wish I could believe that it's real that I'm connecting to so and so, and I just feel like God wants to punish me. It's like, oh, those are some heavy, heavy beliefs, right? That can really hold you down.
With anything that's spiritual or intuitively connected, we really have to be aware of our own spiritual, mental, physical health, right?
Yeah.
And that includes modeling for our children. So if you are healthily addressing the emotional and the mental issues that you're going through, it's going to affect the way you're parenting. It's going to affect the way your children see you. And we can't lift anybody higher than we are. So
Mm.
when you improve your own mental and spiritual health, it's going to positively affect a lot of aspects of your life. But one of those things is going to be spiritual gifts. It's going to be your experiences with those loved ones on the other side. So giving a good example to your children of doing that is going to really help them understand how they can have more positivity. When I know a lot of people who have had these experiences as children, right? It just seems to happen. It crops up if you're very sensitive, it crops up when you're a child. Being able to watch the difference of having that kind of support and having the positive modeling, and parallel it to somebody who didn't. It leads to very drastic differences as an older youth and an adult. I was watching a YouTube video just the other day. It's a pretty popular interview with a man who has a lot of gifts. And he was raised in a community where they discussed these things and where he watched his parents actively try to implement faith in their life. Um, he didn't have any explanation as a child, as most of us don't, or even a language to use to explain the things that were happening to him, to his parents when he was very young. And then they joined a different church congregation, maybe a more charismatic congregation, where the pastors talked a lot about gifts in the spirit. And he was listening to a sermon and they mentioned seeing in the spirit. They mentioned using these gifts. And all of a sudden, he realized there was a context for him to talk about it. And he brought it up to his parents. And they listened and they gave weight to what he was saying. They believed him. And he was able to transition into a healthy relationship with his gifts, even though he had been seeing scary things as a child for years going to bed that kept him awake. Suddenly, those things no longer held power over him anymore. And he watched his parents shift as they became active members of his faith. And they began to better their lives. And he began to also implement a lot of the principles and stuff they were modeling for him and have a context to talk to his parent and his congregation about these gifts, which were recognized. And as an adult, he's entirely functional with these things. He's had many, many positive experiences. He has learned a lot of intentional control over his abilities, and he uses them in a very useful way in his faith tradition, his congregation. You parallel that with my story, and it's not my parents' fault. We were real spotty on our attendance with any church, and I didn't really have a way to talk to them or bring this up, and so I was shut down. I was closeted. I was afraid. I was under this cloud of anxiety for years of my life. And it wasn't until my mid to late 20s that I really intentionally sought after how to understand and how to use this. And so implementing this with my own children, um, I'm a very intellectual based person. I love doing social studies. And so I'm looking at the dichotomy between examples of people like this man and examples of people like me who didn't have the support in the upbringing, who didn't have especially parental support, but community support is really important too. It's starkly different for how that changes as they grow and they become adults. So really giving a rich foundation of conversation, understanding, and place to talk about this and modeling appropriate uses and inappropriate uses of this behavior influences children very strongly as they grow into adults on how they're going to either be plagued by something or see it as a gift that they have control over and can use to benefit themselves and other people.
Because ultimately, even if we are having negative experiences, the light is stronger than the darkness. And so
Right.
we don't have to just be plagued. We can say, hey, I'm not going to feed into this fear. I'm going to visualize even like a white light around me and pray for God to send angels. And I'm going to lift myself above where this negativity, kind of that level. And I'm going to just be
Right.
above it and practice. It's a practice, right? It's not perfect the first time, but we ultimately do have that control because the light is stronger than the darkness. And I like how in this YouTube video, he calls it seeing in the spirit, because if you
Right.
can give something a title or a label, it feels more manageable. It's like Mr. Rogers said, if it's mentionable, it's manageable.
It's manageable.
So I love that little term, seeing in the spirit. That's what you can call it. You know, sometimes we see things that are positive and sometimes scary things happen. And this is what we do when something scary happens. And I do want to point out also that one of my kids before, so my son Wesley passed away. And then a year after he died, I had another baby boy. One of my kids saw she came to me and she's like, Mom, I saw like this boy walking through the hall. It was a spirit. He looked like Wesley, but he was a little thinner, and Wesley was built like a football player. Would have been like a linebacker. She's like, he was a little thinner and his hair was like a sandy or brown. It was not so blonde. It was just like kind of sandy colored. And then lo and behold, here we have a 5-year-old little boy who looks a lot like his brother, but his hair's a darker color. He's a little bit thinner. So sometimes you see spirits, or, you know, children can see spirits of people that are yet to be born.
I mean, there's all kinds of spirits hanging out. High vibe, low vibe, spirits that are going to come, spirits that have been here, spirits that were here a long time ago.
Yeah.
I think an interesting thing to really hit on is that children need to understand, and adults too, that they have power over this gift. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't just happen to them. You can learn, you can develop, you can learn intentional practice to turn it on, to turn it off, to control it instead of letting it control your life. Parents are terrified by gifted children sometimes, and children are terrified by their own gifts. And the thing that makes us feel the most fear is a lack of control. And that is merely an illusion in this instance, just like anything else. Control is always possible. It's like a muscle, and you are the driver. It doesn't drive you. Once I figured that out, my entire life changed. And I'm really, really passionate about not letting anybody live in a place of fear, but also parents. So we have several friends who demonstrated really strong gifts as children. One woman was like very telekinetic, almost like moving objects with her energy and throwing them across the room. And her mom was like, "Just do that," like. And it scared her, her parents' reaction to it, instead of having an encouraging um, reaction to set boundaries and help her decide or understand how something like this could be used. It was a fear-based reaction, and that caused her to spin out of control with it and lose it ultimately. And then we have another friend who was very, very intuitive and could really easily pick up on things and people and what they were going through, even very personal details. And instead of maybe helping set boundaries and show her child ethical use, her mother was more on the curious side and encouraged prying in a way that is not necessarily healthy or ethical. And so talking with your children and helping them understand their own gifts, setting boundaries, helping them figure out what is the right way and what is maybe not as good of a way to apply these things that they are naturally inclined to, that just seem to kind of happen with them, I think can be really important too, to set up an approach to how to do these things as an adult. For that very psychic child that became this good friend of ours, she was terrified of her gift for a long time because it felt wrong to use it, because she had always been using it in ways that were maybe irresponsible or um, not so ethical in her childhood home. So I think the best way to do that, like we've mentioned so often already, is talk about it, bring it up, and like dinner conversations, bedtime conversations, car conversations. The car is an excellent place just to like bridge any random subject because it's kind of expected.
You have
All
a
the weird stuff.
captive audience. They can't go
Right.
anywhere.
Can't go anywhere. I've talked about some really in-depth and some really fluffy and some really strange things in the car, but dinner conversations and stuff too. If you bring up your own experiences with your children and you let them know how you're handling it, I think that that gives a really wide door to kind of, by example, set boundaries for what's okay, what's not okay. Ask them if they've had experiences. Ask them what they do with those. Oh, did you feel when mom was angry earlier? How did that make you feel that you could feel when I was angry? Did that make you scared? Do you feel other people's emotions too? What do you do with that information? Just kind of give it a context for them to place around it. Um, have you seen spirits behind people before? Do you tell them? Maybe that's not the best thing to tell them. When I see spirits around people, this is
Yeah.
how I handle it.
Yeah.
Or share your experiences. One time, mom was in the shower and mom knew somebody was watching them in the shower, and mom told them to go away because that's not okay,
Hmm.
right? And I think normalizing that kind of conversation in such a way that you can share your own experiences about it, like it's the bread you're eating for dinner, right?
Yeah.
It's a normal thing to occur.
Right.
Will help them talk about it.
I wanted to say also, sometimes these experiences are not good or bad, they're neutral.
Right.
My 5 year old woke up the other day and he told my older daughter that he heard somebody in his bedroom say, like a little boy's voice, say excitedly, airplane. Like, what do I do with that? It's not good or bad. It's just airplane. I don't know. He's not the type to like have like imaginary friends, or like his imagination's really not that big. So, and that's the only time he's ever said he's heard someone say something in his room.
Hmm.
So I don't know why, but
I
airplane.
think laughing about it,
Yeah.
like even the things that tend to be maybe a little more scary, instead of being like, oh my gosh, our house is haunted. It's
Mm,
like, isn't that funny? Sometimes spirits say the strangest things. Did it make you feel scared? I would be scared. I think that was funny. Maybe you should laugh with that spirit or something
yeah.
like that. Or be like, I think sometimes spirits say things to make us laugh or stuff like that. Like, give them a humorous light in which to look at those experiences. Like if they hear footsteps down the hallway or something, really common occurrences people hear. Footsteps, knocking, sometimes voices. Be like, my husband, for instance, we used to we used to have strange smells that belonged to the previous owner of our last home. And he had passed away in the home. He had been the only owner to ever own the house, and we would sometimes smell strange things. I would see him stand in the hallway. Sometimes we'd hear footsteps go down the hallway. And my husband, sometimes I would tell them, "Oh, that's just Jim." His name was James Chesney. That's just Jim. But sometimes my husband would joke with my kids, especially in the basement. He'd be, what was its name? Like Bob the ghost or something. He'd be like, "Oh, that's just Bob. It's Bob the ghost. He's coming in to say hi." Or, "Did you take care of Bob today?" Or like when they were in the basement playing, it's like, "Did you guys make sure to say hi to Bob? He really hates it when you ignore him and you make him feel left out." Like, so when they heard footsteps down the hall, I'd be like, "Oh, it's Bob." And we're like, "Yes, it's Bob." Or Jim, could be either. And making light of that situation. When it wasn't negative, it wasn't necessarily positive. It was just a neutral experience that they were
I
having.
really like that because when I was a kid, I was 10 years old. We went to go see the play The Phantom of the Opera, and it was like kind of spooky and like, oh my gosh, you know? And I remember I'd sit and play the piano because I used to play a lot of piano. And I could sense sometimes I felt like I was being watched or listened to, and I was like, oh my gosh, do I have a phantom? But what it really boiled
Did you
down
sing
to
to it?
was I was like, seriously, I'm like, I'm Christine. I'm just kidding. But no, I could sense that I there was this energy. We my brother and I both later we would, say, didn't you hear footsteps going up the stairs in that house? Didn't you hear footsteps going across? We had this hall that was like a bridge, so there was nothing underneath it, right? And we both heard the same things. And so I'm like, maybe there was spirit activity in my house growing up, but no one ever talked about it until we got older. And so I was just weirded out by the whole thing. And I put more of a negative attribution to it when it could have just been so neutral. Like, so what? Somebody used to live here, and who knows, like, what's happened in this house before we came along. It wasn't necessarily a dark feeling. It was more of like, I just felt like I wasn't alone.
If you've ever watched like, Ghost Hunters, legit ghost hunting, not the crappy entertainment kind where everything is scary. People who help people who have a presence in their house, especially, but this can be applied to many, many different instances, whether or not you have a spirit that's in your house or you just have interactions with passerby spirits or even loved ones. Um, the best way to handle the situation is to coexist peacefully. And the best way to do that is to acknowledge the presence of something and get comfortable with it. Not be afraid of it, not feel like you don't have control in your own home, in your own life. Um, and if it's not something that is agreeable to you. If it's not something that you would like to be experiencing, ask it to leave. If you don't like the way a spirit is showing up, ask them to stop. If you don't like the footsteps in the hallway, be firm with it and say, go away. Stop. This is scaring me. I don't like it. Go away. Pray over the home, bless the home, Palo Santo, use sage, whatever you feel comfortable using. But understanding that you can have a relationship with these things that can be positive,
Mhm.
or you can send it away, I think is kind of the cure all to the situation. You don't want to be afraid. And understanding and control is what lends, um, which is what casts out the fear, right?
Right. So there's this place I like to go stay. It's these little beach cottages. It's called Crystal Cove. And they have probably 40 or so restored beach cottages that were built in the early 1900s or mid 1900s. And I've stayed at probably five different of the cottages so far. And I went to one last May. And as soon as I walked in, I was like, there's spirits here. I just felt it. You know, I could identify a woman and like a couple others. Maybe it was like two guys and a girl, two girls and a guy. I just remember specifically picking up on a woman. I walked in and I was like, okay, they felt kind of neutral. And so I said, just kind of in my head, I was like directing thoughts towards them. I said, hey, I can sense that you're here. As long as we can all get along, I don't have an issue with that, you know? And then I was unloading some groceries and I put one of them on the counter, like it was like a cereal box. And I heard a woman tell me, don't put that there. Because I did feel this territorialism when I first walked in. And I
Mm.
was like, listen, we can all get along peacefully. I don't care if you guys are here. But then when she told me to, like, she kind of snapped at me. She's like, don't put that there. I said, okay, you need to leave. I'm not okay with you being here anymore. You need to leave. And as I said that, I meant not just her, but the other two. I'm like, you all need to go. I felt the spirit of a man come who was a protector, almost like he was one of those guards that had like a little, like, what are those staffs that they would hold like in their hands, you know? I felt him come in and I felt him like push out the others and just kind of hang out like, I'm here to protect you. And
Hmm.
when I was checking out of the cottage, I was talking to the lady at the front desk. She's lovely. She's from Eastern Europe. We were just chit chatting about a ton of things. And I said, oh, by the way, number 45 is haunted. And she said,
Just casually.
just casually, you know, she's like, oh, that's interesting you said that because the maintenance man who has been working on the property for years has also mentioned that he has felt activity in that area.
Verified.
Yeah.
I think you bring in a really excellent point too, which is something that I frequently will tell my children, and I kind of mentioned it before, is that you can ask for your angels to help you.
Mm.
Um, and those can be angels that maybe you don't necessarily know. It can also be your loved ones. Sometimes when my kids are really scared, I will pray with them and we will pray that Gigi, their great grandmother, my grandmother, who has been a protective spirit, will come stay with them, especially at night. You know, kids have a lot of anxiety. Sometimes the dark is a scary thing. And it really, I think, allays those fears to have someone they know that is there. Like my middle boy, all the time he's like, I just don't want to be alone upstairs. Can an adult come upstairs? And we're like, no, we're like getting stuff done downstairs. We need to be downstairs right now. And so, like, let's pray. We'll ask Gigi that she'll be upstairs with you, right? And giving them someone that they know that they can focus on, a presence that is comforting to them, that they can maybe pick out or feel for, I think can be a really helpful tactic. And you can do that even with older kids. I mean, younger kids, when you start talking about it, it kind of becomes their reality. It's something that's more acceptable to them that they don't necessarily challenge, at least not right away. With older kids, it can be a little bit more challenging, especially as they become teenagers. It's like, that's not even real, mom. That doesn't even help me, you know, especially if you have a sensitive child. But even if you don't, you can train this skill in your children because we all have sensitivity to a degree, right? In moments, maybe sacred moments or special moments or peaceful moments, these things happen. Point out to your children, do you feel that peace? Do you feel that moment? I bet there are angels here, or that's the Holy Spirit, or something like that. Train them to point out those moments when something is there, when something occurs, because you can have them bring that feeling back in moments where they might need it, or moments where they feel out of control, or moments where they just need peace. Be like, remember that feeling that we had before? Let's ask for angels to bring that back to us. Let's ask for them to surround us. Let's ask for them to be with us because we're promised that. in the Bible, right? We're promised the ministry of angels. All we have to do is ask for it,
Now, also, we have to be aware that if we're really open about this with our kids,
right?
you never know what they're going to say and when they're going to say it. So my daughter, who's 8, she is autistic. So she's just very like literal, black and white. It happened. What she doesn't really like, feel out the social context of a situation. Would this be an appropriate time to talk about X, Y, or Z? So, with her and my younger son, they don't know what I do for work. They do know that I talk about angels a lot and I talk about their brother who's passed on. And my one of my kids has seen like her grandmother. She described her because she didn't know her. Her grandma died. She was little and she hadn't had a lot of experiences with her. And one time she was like, "Mom, who's that lady?" And there's this picture we have of her. And I was like, "Well, that's your grandma." She's like, "I saw her in my room last night and she was giving me a hug." She's like, "I recognize her, She's like, I know who she is, but who is she?" And she's your grandma. So you never know when they're going to talk about these things. My 2 youngest kids go to this music class together. And the teacher came out a couple weeks ago and she was like, "Oh, your kids were telling me about their brother who passed away. And they were telling me about your songs. And yeah, it's really interesting." And I'm like, what are my kids saying to people? And like, what brought this up? They're at a music class. You just don't know. Just gotta
Kids
be
can
ready.
spout anything, anytime.
Anything.
To a certain degree, you just kind of have to be okay with the possibility that it could come out. Though I think especially young kids can just be a random water spigot of
Loose cannon.
commentary, right? But older kids, I mean, um, there is kind of a fear. I mean, I do this pretty professionally. You do as well, Camille. My kids know that this is a gift of mine. I've told them years since, and so it is something that we talk about, we bring up on occasion. And I have friends, and it's also something that I've thought about before. And the worry becomes like, I don't want them to be negatively seen at school. I don't want their other people to think they're weird because of what I do or because of the things they're talking about. So, being intentional in the language that you use, I think because it gives them the language that they use and the way that they talk about it. And there are ways that people find more socially acceptable than other ways, maybe like mentioning angels, like mentioning Wesley as their brother, I think is really acceptable way to use that. Um, then there are ways that are a little bit more strange. So my my children in our faith tradition, we have missionaries, right? They're usually young people. Their purpose is to share the gospel to people who are interested in hearing it. They also do a lot of service, and they're stationed in a lot of different areas. Our church puts them in different areas where they can go serve. And oftentimes the local congregation will sign up to feed them or have them over or something like that to support the work they're doing. We often feed the missionaries dinner. We had them over one night. It was 2 sister missionaries, 2 girls, 2 women, and we were just having a regular dinner conversation, right? My 7-year-old all of a sudden goes, "My mom sees ghosts." So we're talking about like the potatoes or something. And all of a sudden he goes, "My mom sees ghosts." And it's like, well, that's out there now. And some people brush that off as the imaginings of a 7-year-old because they like spout all kinds of random stuff, right? These sisters turn to me and they go, "Really?" So we had a conversation in which we could take it in a very uplifting direction about spiritual gifts and angels and loved ones through the veil. And then I had a conversation with my son, like appropriate times and places to bring these kinds of things up and how it's very special and very, sacred in nature. And I say, yes, mom sees ghosts, but more often mom will see angels or mom will see grandma or loved ones or mom will help people. Giving them the right words to use, I think will go a long way. Presentation matters.
Mm, hmm.
I do, I do ghost hunt and I do those things. And I think there's a way to talk about that in a positive way, but emphasis more on the healing work and the things I do. That's what I want my children to share, because I think it will be better received by everybody around them.
We're children of God, and He's going to help us through this. And um, to instill like that faith in them. This is going to be a really faith promoting experience. It's a really
I think
great
so.
opener to talk about spiritual things with your kids.
Yeah. When you make them a reality, right? Because so often religion, faith, it's very nebulous. It's very abstract. It's not a concrete thing. It's not like talking about homework or your
Hmm.
friends, or it's like, how's your relationship with Jesus today? It's different than how's your relationship with Jack down the street, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to really give substance to something that is so spiritual, so faith-based. But when you can openly talk about these things and normalize them, it gives them substance and it helps them really grasp things and concepts that can otherwise be really difficult to apply in a practical way. You make them practical, essentially, by talking about them being things that you can actually experience. I actually have another really good friend of mine, and she's written a book for children. It's a children's book. It's beautifully illustrated, um, where it talks about children who have spiritual experiences and how to positively handle them. And I would love to get her on here, and we might do a mini-sode with her where she talks about that book and how she approaches that.
Thanks for being with us here today. If you have, there's, I feel like this is a big conversation opener. There could be other tangents that we go on with this topic. If you have
Right.
questions, please make comments on, whatever platform you use to watch this. Or if you want to join our Facebook community, you can find more information about that on our website, which is throughtheveilpodcast.com.
Right. And if you would like to reach out to Camille or I, we're always contactable via the email.
Yeah.
We love getting emails. We love hearing from you guys. We have had some really awesome people share their awesome stories with us through the emails. If you would like to set up a session, or get into one of our classes, I have a new round of courses coming up that'll be starting in February, and Camille has offerings as well.
Thanks for being with us today. See you guys next time.
See you next time.